Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 70, Conclusions, Part 3. Last time we came to the conclusion that Socrates and Euthyphro are extreme characters, indicating that they are deigmata. A deigma is something that can be pointed at, and a shopkeeper would point at any of the things that he wished to sell. But he made his deigmata according to a model which he did not want to show to customers, and that was his paradeigma. So the paradeigma is a basic model, and the deigmata are exactly like that paradeigma, but with additional details. The paradeigma of which Socrates is a deigma is the dialectician, as usual. However, in this dialogue, we see how the dialectician is actually the hosios, the holy one, who appears to be unholy. And Plato has managed this by using some features from the historical Socrates. Socrates was historically accused of asebeia, disrespect to the gods, and after the time of this dialogue he was found guilty and condemned to death. Another characteristic taken from the historical Socrates was the daimonion, which adds to the idea that a dialectician need not be someone who is opposed to the gods or religion. Even when we remove the characteristics peculiar to Socrates, we still have a dialectician who asks questions because he wants his interlocutor to improve, and that is surely a good thing. And it would seem that a dialectician would realize that divine powers who give humans all the good things would not simply become offended at anything humans did, and would not choose to deprive humans of good things. In that way, Socrates, but also the dialectician, would be rather similar to the gods in being good, in doing good deeds, but the dialectician would know his place and would respect the gods. He is aware that the gods are good, they are therefore rational, they want humans to be good as well, and the dialectician does his best to be good. Obviously not simply to do what the gods want, but because being good is a good thing. Thus, a dialectician reading this dialogue would regard Socrates as hosios in as much as he respects the gods, while the many who read this dialogue or knew Socrates historically would regard him as asebes, disrespectful, and some of them actually voted to have him put to death. Thus we have a character who is actually hosios and theosebes, holy and God-respecting, while appearing asebes and anosios, disrespectful and unholy. This is achieved by having two different audiences, the dialecticians and the many. The many are the ones who are not dialecticians, obviously. We might therefore assume that Euthyphro is the one who is actually unholy, but appears to be holy. But this is not the case. It is emphasized in the dialogue that the many laugh at Euthyphro. He doesn't appear to them to be holy. They laugh at him precisely because he takes mythology seriously. Furthermore, his family regard him as disrespectful because he's prosecuting his father. So in a way, Euthyphro appears just like Socrates to be disrespectful and therefore unholy. This is clearly unsatisfactory in a dialogue where we already have one character who appears unholy although he actually is holy. We would like to see a deigma which is the opposite. It appears to be holy, but it is unholy. If we recall that Euthyphro thinks exactly like the court of the Archon Basileus, with the same assumptions about the gods, that they are willing to abandon humans so that pollution spreads throughout the city, then we may see that the deigma, which is the opposite of Socrates, is the cult of the Archon Basileus itself. Euthyphro comes into play as the personification of the cult of the Archon Basileus, and he is made fun of by the many. He is disrespectful. This is difficult to see in the cult of the Archon Basileus itself, because it is a respected institution set up precisely to deal with unholy acts. The cult of the Archon Basileus necessarily takes mythology seriously if indeed the gods are assumed to be upset by certain things, and yet the many don't laugh at it. The court of the Archon Basileus allows the prosecution of Euthyphro's father, and yet the many don't accuse the court of being disrespectful to the father. I've said that Euthyphro is a personification of the cult of the Archon Basileus, but this does not mean that Euthyphro is a deigma from the paradeigma, the cult of the Archon Basileus. They are both deigmata of a paradeigma which we haven't discussed yet. The cult of the Archon Basileus is obviously not a paradeigma because it is an entity in its own right with its own peculiarities, and Euthyphro certainly isn't simply that institution presided over by the Archon Basileus, with a few additional details such as being a man. What then could be the paradeigma of which Euthyphro and the cult of the Archon Basileus are deigmata? I suggest that the paradeigma here is Athenian religion, which allows this sort of thing to go on, this prosecution of a good man who appears to be bad, and the prosecution of a father who is equally good, because the father of Euthyphro was simply doing what he should do according to Athenian religion. A dialogue between these two paradeigmata would be unfeasible, a dialectician and Athenian religion, and that is why we have the deigmata. Thus, Athenian religion appears to be holy, but is actually unholy, while a dialectician appears to be unholy, but actually is holy. Both paradeigmata are representations of an abstract idea. They are each an aspect of that abstract idea. I think we can guess by now what that idea is. It is hosiotes, holiness, or tohosion, the holy. They're the same idea. Slightly more philosophical to say tohosion, the holy. It arguably has a wider application. Plato could have simply explained what the holy is and how some people mistake the holy for something else, but he has chosen to dramatize the holy, and not only that, to dramatize the holy and show how it can be misconstrued, to the extent that someone like Socrates could be killed for appearing to be unholy when he was actually holy, while the whole court of the Archon Basileus appears to be holy and yet is unholy, partly because it killed Socrates. Clearly there are added benefits to having Socrates as the deigma of the dialectician. What then is the holy? The element of being God-loved isn't strictly part of the definition, although it is important to the misconstrual of the holy. Let's begin with the other element, respect for the gods. The correct respect for the gods is to regard them as good and rational and kind, and not temperamental and hysterical. They don't stop being good just because they are offended or anything like that. Therefore, the dialectician who's worked through all of the reasoning behind this has come to that conclusion that the gods must be good, while the many are still trapped in the traditional view that the gods are forces of nature and for some reason are good to us when they are pleased with us. And it's this view that the gods may be angry with us unless we please them, which makes the notion of being God-loved so important in apparent holiness. It is not important in actual holiness. I should add that holiness does not include justice. There is talk of justice in this dialogue, but it is incidental. Obviously, in a court of any justice, there should be justice, but the court of the Archon Basileus deals with the holy, and any justice in it is simply for rhetorical purposes. It is a completely unjust system. Euthyphro says that his father killed the serf unjustly, while it's obvious from the description that his father had no choice but to leave the murderer in a ditch while he sent to the religious authorities in Athens to find out what to do with him. And then Euthyphro has the gall to say that he is just in prosecuting his father because Zeus and his father Kronos behaved justly in overthrowing their fathers, as if there is any comparison between what he's doing and what the gods did. The gods do not deal with justice. Justice is something between humans. Well, we've come to the end of this analysis of Euthyphro. I strongly recommend that you go back and read the dialogue again with this new orientation. Even if you don't become holier, you will become more dialectical, and that's always a good thing.